Welcome to Shut Up and Say Something. I am your host and creator of the show, Deedre Daniel. And today I am speaking with Lawrence Richards, and he is a total stranger to me. And the way this all came about is Terry Carden, who I interviewed in episode 2. She's the person who is the successful entrepreneur who's selling all of her stuff and moving out of her 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhome in Tennessee to move into a tricked out van and explore the world all over America and beyond. And this is her brother. And she said, you should interview my brother. He's really interesting. And I have a little confession. I get that a lot. There are quite a few people that'll say, hey, you should have my friend or my mom on your show. And I'll say, well, what do they do that's so interesting? And then they'll follow it up with something like, they like to eat. And that's not someone I want to have on the show. I mean, of course, we all want to eat, and sure, that could be interesting, but that's not really taking me anywhere. And Terry led with a question. Well, you're going to need to ask him about the property he lives on. He has to wear special headgear to live on it. I'm like, well, that's really bizarre. But the thing is, Terry's kind of a practical jokester. So I wasn't sure if that was legit. Was she pulling a trick on me or something along those lines? So I'm not even sure if this is true. And so now I absolutely had to interview Lawrence. But that got me thinking, what if others that listen to this show recommend somebody else to be on a future episode, but instead of saying, oh, they like to eat or they like to work out, they give me a list of 10 bizarre, intriguing, or ridiculous questions about them based on their life? Or perhaps these are just hilarious questions they would like me to ask their friend. I do recommend that you get some sort of permission from your friend or family member that you would like to have on the show. Make sure they agree to it and send me a list of 10 questions and their name. Send it to service@interestingconversations.com. And if I select your nominee, I will send you a Shut Up and Say Something sticker. I will send you some of these other stickers that I have created that I call from the Ridiculous Rules collection, like do not lick this. And you can put that on just about anything. And then something from the merchandise collection, like perhaps this mug I have, which says do not pee in this. And it has a person on the front with a little cross off little red circle, and they're peeing. And so it says, do not pee in this mug. And the mug is yellow on the inside. It is bright yellow, though. If your pee is that yellow, it means you probably need to drink more water or lay off the vitamins or get that checked out. But it is yellow for pee. And I have other products like that. So that would be your reward for sending someone my way. And of course, I'll give you a shout out on the show as well. And they don't need to be local or be in my time zone. We can do this on Zoom or StreamYard or any other kind of platform like that. So just send me their name and 10 ridiculous questions to service@interestingconversations.com. As a reminder, this podcast is all about how to live a more interesting and fascinating life. And we're learning how to do that one interesting conversation at a time. We try to stay away from politics, religion, and the ad nauseum topic du jour, but anything else is fair game. And today's episode is an experiment. If you want a more interesting life, you need to take a few risks and head down paths without knowing where we'll end up. And talking to strangers seems a little dangerous, but how risky is it really? And that's what we're going to find out today. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you. It's great being here. I love the idea of having a podcast and then having a section of the podcast, an episode be about talking to strangers. I feel like I'm not a stranger because as soon as I got asked about doing this, I went back and listened to all the other podcasts and then got terrified. Other than that.
Why were you terrified?
It feels like all the people that you've interviewed have so much more colorful of a life than I feel like I have myself. And it's such an enormous compliment to have my sister recommend me because she is one of the most intriguing, special, wonderful, exciting. All my siblings are. They all have this joy of life that just comes through. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I've done some of the crazy things I have in my life is sort of try to grab onto some of that joy.
Or maybe it's sibling rivalry.
There's probably a little bit of that too. I don't know how much time you spent with Terry, but if you said our family's name and list like 10 qualities, playing games and gamesmanship would be
Uh-huh.
right up there. We have rivalries that have gone on for 20 years. So, the podcast has been great. It's an eclectic group of individuals that you're interviewing, and it's so fun.
Oh,
And then
good.
when I got asked to do it, I was like, okay. Terry made the introduction. I was like, we'll see how this goes. I don't particularly think of myself as an interesting person. I think I like to position myself into interesting positions. If you can't be interesting, then be around interesting people. So I try and do that too.
Well, this podcast is all about how to have a more interesting life. That's what you're doing. This is about how to have that fascinating life because so many people are bored, they feel numb, they are, kind of struggling with their lives. And they're like, there's got to be more to it than this. And so for you to come forward and talk about some quirky things that you're doing, it makes them go, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to try something different. And that's what they need. For the longest time, I think people thought they had to be famous to be able to have an interesting life, or it's a weird goal to have to be famous. Like, I don't think people really want to be famous if they found out all the weird people that would gravitate towards you and your lack of privacy and all that kind of stuff. What they want is to feel loved. They want to be awake, alive, and they want to experience new things. That's what they want. And you're doing that. That's why you're interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting. You said the word goal. When I started my business and I went to an entrepreneurship event, like a lot of people do, and I was talking to someone and they said, okay, I'm going to ask you everyone in the room a question. And everyone was getting ready to talk about what their business was going to be and all these, you're ready to answer these questions you're used to. And he goes, so how's your business going to end? I wasn't expecting that. And he's like, that's it. All you have to do is figure out how you're going to end your business, come up with 2 or 3 goals that are going to meet that, and then write down the next goals. And then everything should be towards that.
Yeah.
And it's the same with starting a podcast or raising a family or living a life. And so I started deep thinking into that. And I was like, wow, it's like everything is that. Just do a goal. And then everything's got to go towards a goal. And so if your goal is to be famous, don't start a woodworking business, but maybe a podcast. I'd imagine that's not your goal with this. Your goal seems to be, I was listening to, I was like, how do I describe when someone said, what's the podcast about? I was like, Deedre seems to collect what brings people joy and encapsulate it into this little nugget of this is what brought them joy so we can share it with others. I'm like, I like that. That's why I want to do this
nice.
podcast.
I like that. You just brought a couple little tears to my eyes. So I know, but I never thought of it as being something that collects joy, but it is a collection. And I do, I took this little personality test and this person said, are you a collector of things? I was like, no, I'm not a collector of things. And then Terry started joking around with me because she started pointing out stuff that I had collected. I was like, yeah, I guess I am. I'm a collector of experiences. Yeah, it's a collection of conversations. I want the listener to listen and go, I can do it, because I just feel like so many people are stuck. I really do. I'm looking for a tissue because you seriously brought a little tear to my eye. I just had to kind of blink it away.
No, sorry.
No,
sorry.
it's okay. It's not video.
Because I wasn't sure how to posture myself because, I'm going to be blunt. The last podcast I was on, we had a good conversation. And when we were done, the guy had a lot of interviews. And I was his last interview. He was like, I realized I was on the wrong path. And he switched. And I was like, I don't.
So you're thinking I might have some sort of crisis and then not do this again.
Yeah, no, because I love your interviews so far. So I want more.
That's funny. Okay. Well, she's given me a list of interesting questions that do not flow in any logical order at all. And part of me thinks that she's sitting in Tennessee right now, just giggling. If you give me a
Guaranteed.
If you just stare at me and I realize she's playing both of us, I'll move on to a different question. Okay.
Yeah.
No
and
pressure.
Of course, some of the questions have to do with her knowing some of the stuff from when I was, from 30 years ago. So who knows? I might swing it some other way, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Your sister said that you live somewhere that requires special headgear. What in the world? I have a lot of questions. Where is this? What is this? And why do you need headgear?
Headgear is the most interesting way of putting it I've heard. headphones, ear protection, hearing protection might be a little better. So we live on a place. If you drive through the United States and you go towards Seattle and then you go past Seattle and you get wet and you get dry again, you're on a little island called Whidbey Island, just off the coast of Seattle, and we can sort of see Canada. But there's a U.S. Navy base here where they fly a version of the F-18. We bought a property that literally is right next to the takeoff point. So if you sort of watch the Top Gun movie and you see where Tom Cruise is sort of riding his motorcycle next to the airplane while it's going, that's exactly where my house is, right about where his motorcycle would be. So we get some noise, but it's a wonderful piece of property. It's exciting and it's a little bit of a destination because we have friends that come and family that comes. But yeah, so we have 5 acres on this old piece of property with 100-year-old barn and barn owls and animals and otters and beaver that come on the property, and about 5,000 F-18s that take off every year. So that means that as many as, when they're busy, 20 or 30 times an hour, you might get afterburners in the background to where you got to cover your ears.
Wow. So
yeah.
on this recording, we might hear some of those jets taking off. That's what you're saying.
Well, in the beginning, I think there was a couple on the thing, but now that we're recording and you're listening for them, it's guaranteed it won't happen because we'll have guests come over to come and watch the airplanes, and it's almost like someone's listening to us, like, come on over and watch the airplanes, because as soon as they get here, it's like crickets. They go completely quiet. So
my grandfather was a test pilot in the Navy, and he had a little model airplane for every plane that he tested. And I have several of them in my library on one of the shelves. And I just absolutely loved looking at those airplanes when I was a little girl. So I'm thrilled to have them. Yeah. Yeah. He had a lot of really interesting stories, but we're not going to talk about my grandfather. We're going to talk about you. So, okay, we have that question answered. Then she says, ask him about the year with Harvey.
Well, that almost leads into the property a little bit.
Okay.
So I take it she didn't tell you who Harvey was.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So I was in the Air Force and I retired, and I had a plan to go on and sort of just keep on doing the same job I was doing in the Air Force as a contractor. And before I did that, we decided, let's have an adventure. So I have a wife and 2 sons, and we said, okay, so, when I retire from the Air Force, because a lot of people don't realize that in the military, after you spend 20 years, you start collecting a pension, which is an amazing thing. It's an amazing freedom to have, where you get health care and a pension, and it sort of frees you up to be able to do some cool things. So we said, let's go travel. I had wanted to go to Disney World, of all places, and see the fireworks on New Year's Eve. So that was sort of my thing on my list. And my wife, she said, I want to go back to Washington, D.C. and go spend some more time around the Smithsonian Museum and visit the museum some more and actually spend some time with it. And then I had one son that said he wanted to go to Mount Rushmore. And then I had another son that said he wanted to go to Maine and go to Acadia. And so we said, well, gosh, we're traveling all over and flying all over these places. It'd be great. And then I don't remember who it was, probably my wife or I had the idea of, let's just get an RV and travel. So a little bit, like my sister, what we did was we sold our house in Tucson. We bought an RV. And we traveled from Tucson, Arizona, and we just started heading east. We stopped when we wanted to stop and see things and visit with people. And we went down to Key West, all the way down to Key West, and spent the winter down in the Keys. And then went up the East Coast and then came west. And along the way, we sort of discovered ourselves as a family, and we discovered the national park system, and we didn't know what we were going to do. And before we knew it, we were visiting national parks. In the course of 13 months, we went to 177 national park sites.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, hold on. So how old were your children at this point in time?
Yeah. So they were 11 and 13, 2 boys.
Okay. And so then were you homeschooling them so you were able to do this? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the national parks came in there because we didn't know, how we were going to homeschool. We were planning on moving back to England with them because my wife's English and they were both dual citizens. So she was going to
you met her when you were stationed there in the Air Force?
Yep. It's a
Okay. All
story
right.
as old as time. Yeah.
What base were you on?
I was at RAF Mildenhall in the United Kingdom. So it was a little base just north of Cambridge.
Wow. Okay. Well, I went to high school in England, but we're not going to talk about me. We're going to go back to you again. So, okay. So your kids were in middle school pretty much, and you were homeschooling them from this RV as you traveled around the United States, right?
Yeah, that's it. And we didn't know what we were going to do or even really how long we were going to be. And we discovered more than anything. We discovered the places that you find, but we discovered people and the stories that happened. And it kind of ties in actually with this podcast and about meeting strangers. Of course, when you go around the country, you're sometimes seeing family, but for the most part, you're introducing yourself to new people over and over and over and over again. And sharing your stories and laughing and building relationships and then moving on with your life, but still maintaining those relationships in some ways, and accepting the fact that you don't have to be best friends all the time, that you have these relationships all across the country and all across the world. And every once in a while you reconnect, or, sometimes social media helps with that. It's just a wonderful way to maintain connections by not being afraid to walk up to somebody that's at a campfire and say, hey, do you mind if I join your campfire?
Wow.
And just taking it from there. Sometimes you just got to take a chance and ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen if I don't take this chance?
I love that philosophy. And that's pretty much how I live my life. But my question is, was Harvey a hitchhiker or was Harvey the the
Oh,
RV?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I never quite cleared that up.
No,
Yeah,
it's okay.
we called it Harvey the RV.
Harvey the
Um,
RV. Oh, love
and
that.
so yeah, so of course travels with Harvey, the book, and then we had a Honda CRV that we towed it behind it, so we had a Harvey and Curvy, and and it was a fun way to spend a year. And I was gone a lot from the military, so I think my wife had to decide if she was going to keep me or not, now that I was retired. So
Yeah.
there's nothing like being gone about between 6 and 9 months a year to suddenly being in each other's pocket for 13 months. We were literally in 38 feet of house on wheels, and I'm a woodworker, so we basically gutted it, put in bunk beds for the kids, and so there's four of us in one bedroom for a year. We're hiking and camping and doing all the things that you would do on a trip like this. And there was a little piece of me in the back of my mind that was also looking for a backup plan in case we didn't go back to England.
Mm.
And when we got to Whidbey Island in Washington, it was like paradise. We crossed over this big tall bridge which goes over part of the ocean. It was almost like a sign, like the fog rolled back, and we just found this island. And I wanted to slash the tires and stay, but my wife made us finish up the trip. Yeah, so we did 13 months, and then decided to move back up here. And we bought our property here, like crazy people, right on the runway.
Yeah.
And
You just love planes and she was fine with it.
no, none of those things.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
fell madly in love with this property, but they always say location, location, location. And I mean, you got
yeah.
5,000 fighter jets taking off in a year. I'm sure they told you this when you bought it.
Yeah, they make you sign about like 500 pieces of paper saying, you're on a runway, right? Like, you really know you're on a runway, right? You're sure you're on a runway.
And
So
by the way, can you fill out this other form that you understand you're on a runway? Okay.
yes, yeah, they actually do. And when we came to visit, they weren't flying. They go through quiet times in the summertime. We knew there were airplanes and people, sort of had comments on them, but we hadn't really known until we decided to move back. Now we could have moved somewhere else, but we instead decided to take on a challenge and adventure in the actual property. So it's old. I mean, my workshop is 100-year-old granary that we sort of turned into my workshop, and we have 5 acres, and the animals that come on the acreage, and there's people that come to watch the airplanes, and it's just sort of an adventure. It's certainly not the cookie cutter sort of existence for living that I think most people that I knew and that myself that we were experiencing. We decided to try something just different, because
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen?
Well, it's interesting because you're in the military and there is a lot of rank and file Right? Get in line, act a certain way. I know this. My dad was in the Navy. Both of my grandfathers were in the Navy. And I have a huge appreciation for the military, but there's a certain amount of, I don't want to call it groupthink, but they're all going in the same direction. I mean, they have to be able to function. And my mom and dad are pretty straight laced. They do what you expect most of the time. So that's a big deal watching you. Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
So your dad in the Navy, I'd like to hear a little bit about it.
About my father being in the Navy. Oh yeah. So he was, he retired Navy captain. So he was there about 25 years. My mom's a retired math teacher. I mean, they're the most practical, reliable, dependable people I've ever met. They would never go live in a 100-year-old granary. I can tell you that right now. That would just never happen.
Well, security.
This is never going to happen.
Yeah, security in the military is sometimes fleeting. So then when you do have control over certain things, you sort of lean towards being a little bit more conservative with your decisions. I've noticed that amongst a lot of people, but not just the military, other sectors too. Funny enough, the entrepreneurship world, sort of starting to dive into that a little bit. Some of the same parallels that you saw that in certain sectors of the entrepreneurship world. You get into the tech sector and they're not that way. They're all about just, we're gonna go and take risks and do this. But there are other sectors, the medical world, that you start getting around them, and it's the same way. It's that zero risk taken. It feels like anyway. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, my father was cool. He was a hospital administrator in the Navy, so it's medical and Navy. So yes, it's tons of protocols. No surprises, none. Yeah, I can't even imagine.
So that was Harvey. Harvey was our RV that we traveled around, and we discovered our next sort of piece of the world, and we sort of rediscovered ourselves as a family. And
that's nice. Being in those close quarters, when they overcrowd rats, they start to fight. And I just wonder, did you as a family bicker a lot being in the RV?
Well, yeah, I think my sons tried to chew each other's tails off a few times, just like the rats. It's interesting because being together after sort of having space, because you have emotional space, you have physical space, and then suddenly being together like that, it caused us to have to relearn how to build our relationship with each other as a family. And one of the things that I discovered was that it's not just like that with your family. It's that with your friends and with your extended family and with your coworkers. But no matter what, it's all a journey. It's one of those little things where a chemical gets kicked off when you have friendships, and it's an emotion, and you sometimes can't describe why something's important. It's just important. And that's what the trip was for us. I can't sometimes describe what it did for my marriage or what it did for my relationship with my children, but I can tell you that it was one of the most meaningful things that you could ever do. And you don't have to go on an RV trip to do that. You just have to make a concerted effort to pay attention. And I try and do that and fail miserably most of the time, but
Well, it sounds like at least you're aware. I mean, so many other people don't even think about it. They're just staring in their cell phones all day and not really not taking the time to connect with anybody. So I think that's fantastic. Were there any moments that stood out to you, like when you look back at it? Because how many parks did you go to again? You said a lot.
There are national parks, and then there are locations that are affiliated with the national park system. So altogether, 177, I think, was the number of places that we went. And some of those were big places, like you would think about, like Yellowstone and Yosemite, and other ones were, sort of what I don't want to call them medium-sized, but they're ones everyone knows, like, Mount Rushmore, or Glacier National Park, or Grand Tetons.
Mount Rushmore is a medium-sized park. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the massive ones, in my mind. And then you had the most interesting ones to me were the little tiny ones where maybe I hadn't even heard of the person that we're going to the national park for. And those were the ones that stand out the most to me. For example, we were going to something called Friendship Hill in Pennsylvania. It was a little tiny, it was basically a house and a field. And it was all about this man that I'd never heard of. And we went there, and the relationships that we built with the rangers that were there, and then some of the other people that were there, made it one of our favorite parks. It made it one of our favorite places in the entire trip. And it had some to do with the person, because he was an incredibly interesting person. If you're ever going to go deep dive into history, Albert Gallatin was the name of the man, and he was incredibly interesting, and most Americans have never heard of him. But it was those relationships that we built at that park that made it one of our favorites.
I realize the internet is at our fingertips and you can get that information, but I had no idea there were that many parks in America. So is there a little track that you follow? Is there a path? Did you just make this up on your own, or is there a site that people can go to and plan out a trip like this?
Yeah, I think it's nps.gov is the national park site, but we didn't set out. Yeah, we didn't set out to go to national parks. Like we had a couple of places we wanted to go and things we wanted to do, but when we set out on the trip, we kind of set out with an open mind. And as we were heading east, we ran into a couple parks that were sort of within like an hour of each other. I think it was one of the big caves in New Mexico, and then Guadalupe National Forest and White Sands. And so there were three things that we all, we went and saw, and they were all so completely different, but they were right next to each other, and they were free. So, and they were interesting.
Hold on. So can people with an RV just park there for free?
Oh, you couldn't stay there. But you could go visit, and we had a pass. So when you had your national parks pass, you just go to any national park site and you don't pay. But we stayed.
Well, hold on. How much does the pass cost roughly?
I don't know right off. I want to say it's about $100, but it could have changed since then.
And that's per person per year, roughly. I mean, I realize we can look it up.
Yeah, I think ours was the family. They have a great program for veterans, and because of my VA status and my veteran status, we didn't have to pay for ours. So
wow,
that made it
but it still sounds like a great way to explore America. All right, I'm looking it up right now. We need one of those people that can just Google things while we're talking.
Yes.
So it says the military pass is free, but the annual pass is $80.
Yeah,
and that's it. I mean, that's so cheap.
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
Not
just the big parks. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
And our national parks are really one of those special things because they're so varied. They're not just about places. Some of them are about people. Some of them are about events. And sometimes you get a surprise.
I guess no one gets dragged to a park. They're like, damn it, I don't want to be here.
Unless you're on a school trip or something.
I hate parks. Parks suck.
Yeah, but it was fun. I mean, if you ever get a chance to take a year off and just go travel, I recommend it for everybody.
Well, now with the ability to connect with your mobily, like if you're a knowledge worker or what have you, I mean, what's holding you back? Like, why stay in one place if you're able to, if you get a good internet connection, there's no reason why you should have to stay in that one place. Like, think about the things that anchor us. What can we release so that you can go experience life like this? I mean, I think it's wonderful you did that with your family. Really do.
And change and be variable. My friends make fun of me now because I'm known as the guy that never leaves my shop and never leaves the island. But this isn't who I am. This is just who I am right now.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that people get trapped in sometimes is they build these walls around themselves that this is my identity and this is what I do. I'm a person that builds games and runs podcasts, or I'm a teacher, or I'm, a person that runs a business, or I'm something else. And they don't allow themselves the grace to be able to change. Yeah. Because they lock themselves into those corners.
Yeah. I was in the insurance world for 20 years. And for the longest time, I thought this is all I can do. I have to stay in insurance. And then I realized, wait a minute, I do not have to do that. And to your point, now I'm a game inventor and a podcaster. I mean, that was not on my radar at all.
Yeah. It's incredibly important for us to give ourselves grace to be able to change and give ourselves the forgiveness when we don't succeed in whatever we think that we were supposed to do at that moment, and then to change. You can do so many things in your life because it feels short sometimes, but really there's plenty of time in today's day and age to be able to just adjust
So when I started my card game, I didn't know what I was doing. And there were multiple iterations and adjustments I had to make. And even with this podcast, there's things I got to learn about editing and content and scheduling and, interviewing people. And, how close do I talk to this microphone? Am I too close right now? Am I too far away? Like, I don't know. I'm learning right now.
Yeah.
But hopefully people stick along for the ride while I'm figuring it out. And you got to try, you got to start somewhere. And to your point, I mean, you've done all kinds of things.
And I think that's what makes life interesting. That's the flavor of life, is trying to figure out that I might be in this little box right now, and this is what I do. I might have mentioned to you, like I'm a traveler, but right now my friends would know me as someone that stays in my shop and doesn't like to leave the island, but that's not who I am as a person. That's just who I am as a person right now. And I see so many people that paint themselves into a corner with, I've made these decisions, so this is where I am. I just want to kind of like look at them and say, no, you can change who you are and you're still you. You can change what you're doing and you're still you. You don't have to be what you are right now. If it's scary, then it's probably interesting. And if it's interesting to you, then why not? I did my 20 years in the military, and that was a very static sort of thing with lots of exciting times and lots of exciting moments and all the things that go along with a 20-year career in the military. When I was done with that, I decided that we're going to travel. Then the next thing was going to be, we tried like farming of all things. We were like, we're going to live off the land, and that failed miserably, but that's okay.
Were you hungry? Is that what you're saying? You had to keep going to the grocery store?
My wife has a great green thumb and she grows at a small level now, but we were, all these grand plans for how things were going to go, and flexing to that and changing is what adds spice to my life. The flavor is the change. If you had nothing but, one flavor in your food all the time, it would just get boring to me.
Yeah.
Maybe unless it's pepperoni pizza, that would work.
That's a flavor you can keep.
Sure.
What did you try to farm that you failed at so miserably?
Oh, just everything. Even down to like the little things. For example, I left the greenhouse door open, and my wife's lemon and lime tree, because we're trying to grow a lemon and lime tree in Washington State, because why not? But anyway, so they almost died. So I spent like 4 months, getting these 2 trees back to life. I had names for the fruit that were on them, and talked to the trees, and was doing so well at them getting back to life. And basically I killed them. I've given up on that. I figured out that I could just buy a piece of fruit for 49 cents instead.
Pretty much you had the limey trying to grow lime trees.
Yes.
Yeah, and it didn't work out. Yeah.
You were holding on to that one, weren't you?
Right. Didn't they suck on limes and that's why they were called limeys, because they were trying to prevent scurvy or something like that. Like they didn't have enough vitamin C. I thought that was how the whole limey
I think so.
terminology for the British came out. Yeah, like they had to suck on limes as they were going across the Atlantic because they would get scurvy. And I don't even think limes have that much vitamin C in it. Actually, you'd need lemons or something else. But anyway,
my knowledge on that's pretty low. I know not to call my wife a limey though, because
not to call her that. Yeah, it's very it's derogatory. I loved living in England. So you met your wife there. Were you in uniform when she sidled up to you? I mean, how did you find this lovely lass?
There was no her sidling up to me. It was me chasing, basically, for a while. So I knew I loved the experience of living in a foreign country and actually being part of that country. I had friends that would go to the base and then never leave the base.
Yeah.
And that's not the world I wanted. So I chose to live in a little tiny village called Isleham, which is sort of it's in East Anglia in the Fenlands, which is the best way to describe it is when J.R.R. Tolkien was building the Shire, I think, in the books, where the hobbits lived. He based it somewhat on that part of the country, and that's what it was like. It was like the clocks had been turned back 50 years, And in some ways it was terrible, but in most ways it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
I had this gardener here. I was a young man, like 20 years old, but he had a guy that would come and take care of the garden. And he was in his 80s.
Mm.
And he would ride his bicycle. He didn't drive. He'd ride his bicycle down the road to my house with, 4 shovels and a rake, sort of held onto the handlebars of this bicycle. And he would mow my lawn and then drink all my beer. So it was, and he had only been out of the area once in his entire life. And that was to go to the hospital like 20 miles away.
Wow. Yeah. Well, my parents didn't want to live on base either. And I think also too, there was there was a shortage of base housing anyway, but they wanted us to experience out in the economy, right? They want, that's not the terminology that they use.
Yeah.
They
Off
always
base.
said out in the economy, which
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Did they say that then?
That's
They would say
thing.
out. They would say out in the economy. Is that what they'd
Yeah.
say? Weird. I start to doubt my word choices sometimes. Okay. So they had a housing allowance and we rented some British lady's home out in Rickmansworth, and our house had a name instead of a
Yes.
number, which I thought was just the coolest thing ever. And then a couple of houses down, they had a thatched roof.
Yes.
So back to your point, it felt like living in a fairy tale. But every weekend, my parents wanted to go out and about and experience England, experience Scotland. Like we would drive somewhere, whether we were going to a castle or ruins or a museum or seeing a show in London, we were always doing stuff. And our British neighbors had never been to Stonehenge, and it just blew our minds. Like, what are you doing on the weekends? Like, get out and about and see your country. I mean, that's not even that far away. That's one of the wonders of the world. Isn't it one of the wonders of the world? I mean, it's Stonehenge. You haven't gone there. They had never seen the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. I mean, we were doing all the touristy stuff and we did absolutely everything, but they didn't even have like high tea at these little fancy places. Like, you got to try it all. But they loved their gardens there. I remember this tiny little church had a 800th annual flower festival. We're like, you've been doing this for 800 years at this church? Our government hasn't been established that long. And they're, doing this little tiny flower festival for 800 years in this church parking lot. And it's just a bunch of people in the neighborhood come around and show their flowers off. That's what they do.
Yeah.
It's not the British, it's not the accent they use, but yeah.
No, I don't even try to do the accent. So yeah, I had a house name for my house in England too. It was the Orchard is what it was called.
The Orchard? Oh.
And then funny enough here, we do still have a house number, but I have a sign, instead of a number having the name, and we have a little sign outside that's just titled the Runway House.
I love that. That's great.
That's how people refer to it. When my customers come to pick up something, they know when you see the sign that says the Runway House, then I could never
figure out how the postal workers knew how to get letters to you, because it's not like the homes were in alphabetical order. They just knew. Like the name of our house was Cornercroft. We never got someone else's letter by mistake.
I think the British have this, I think every type of people around the world, I think, are born with sort of unique things that they're like the best in the world at. Like that's their superpower. And I think the British superpower might just be directions, because they don't need Google or they don't need anything else. When you get directions from sort of a British person, they would tell you the most specific things. Like, so you go 2 miles down Piddlingham Lane, and then when you see the squirrel, turn right. And they'll tell a story about everything. And then you'll see where old Croft Manor used to be. It burned down 20 years ago, and they'll go on about Croft Manor for 10 minutes. And then it's just the most wonderful, quaint way of things, but they have this sense of direction that's incredible. My wife, I just listen to what she says when she tells me where to go. She knows directions to places she's never been.
My father and I would crack up listening to the weather report, because here in America, they'll say it's going to be hot. It's going to be 90 degrees and you have a 10% chance of rain. And that's pretty much it. But we would listen to these British weather reports and they would say, there'll be little spittles of rain in the morning, followed by a little bit of fog and freshening dew, blah, blah, blah. And they would just go on describing this full day of weather. And then my father would say, but how hot or cold is it going to be? Are we ever going to find that out? Do we need an umbrella? Well, you pretty much always need an umbrella. So we'll have that, but they just would describe it, this long description of the weather.
How long were you in England?
3 years. Yeah.
That's a nice length of time. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a teenager, but I loved living there. I thought it was a lot of fun. I didn't like some of the food, and I fell in love with Indian food because the Indian food had so much flavor. It's like, finally something with flavor, because I would bite into something else. I'm like, how did they mess up green peas? Like, where's the salt? I mean, come on. Like, you've hard or mushy. Like, there's no in between at all.
Take any random dish and stick a potato in it. That's so I'm curious that we build so many of our life skills as far as teaching ourselves how to interact with other people in those teenage years to actually change countries. Now, I know you're probably around a lot of other American kids, but there's still a difference in that relationship building going from one country to another, even if you're all speaking English. Did you find that to be a challenge when you did come back to the States, or?
Oh, shoot. There's so many challenges. Okay. First off, I went to a high school called London Central High School, and it was in High Wycombe. And it originally, I guess, started in London and they just moved it over to High Wycombe. So it kept the name London Central. And the students that went there, most of them were military brats who either their parents were stationed in England or their parents were stationed all over the world, and they didn't have a school on their base or in certain American civilian contract type jobs. So they sent them to the boarding school where I went, but I commuted every day. So I lived with my strict parents who had these, hardcore rules, going to school with other students who had no parental supervision at all, no cell phones, no internet. They'd have one phone call a week to their family. And then they were just on their own, living in a country that didn't care if kids drank, because they would drink alcohol, no problem at all. And so there I'd go home every night to the prison warden, my parents with the strict rules. And I knew all my friends were just gallivanting around doing whatever they wanted to. And they had a great time. And the activities that they put together for all the kids there were really enriching. And we actually have a reunion coming up, and we just have a lot in common because it was such an unusual experience for us living in England, and all the kids came from different backgrounds. You know that in the military, It's a huge melting pot, but then also this unique experience being in this quasi boarding school with really no, parental guidance at all. I don't think my parents will ever listen to this podcast, so I'll tell you this story. So what I would do is I would tell my parents that I was going to spend the night at Trish's house. And I love staying at Trish's house because Trish was great. She's a great friend of mine, and she was a day student as well, but they lived very close to the actual school where I lived about an hour away. And I would stay at her house, and her parents did not care what time we came home. They wouldn't smell our breath or anything like that. Like, they gave her space. And so I loved spending the night at her house, because then I'd meet up with all the dormies in this park called the Rye, and we would get bottles of liquor from the liquor store. We're talking age 15, 16. We no problem at all. They would take our money. And in fact, police officers would drive through the park. This is late at night and it's dark. There's no lights. And we're sitting there getting sloshed, drinking straight from the bottle. And I remember one time these police officers drove up And I said to my friends, my high school friends, like, don't worry, I'll handle it. And I walked over there completely drunk and just started talking to the police officers, like, we're just hanging out. We're having a good time. How are you doing? And all that. And they said, oh, well, I guess you're the American kids from the school up the hill. Like, yeah, we are. They're like, all right, well, don't get any trouble. And they drove off and that was normal. Right. And
Yeah.
so then I graduated and moved to Tallahassee and started going to school at Florida State University. And my first weekend in Tallahassee, the roommate that I was going to have, that I had been, she was like my pen pal, this person I didn't know at all. She was going to be my roommate. She decides to go to University of Florida last minute. That was her first choice. And I guess they suddenly had an opening. So she leaves. So I don't have a roommate. I'm in a college that I don't know anybody at all. And I'm walking down the hallway and some people said, I introduced myself and they said, well, we're going to a party. Do you want to come? I said, yeah, absolutely. So I was at this fraternity house and I'm standing there drinking a beer and suddenly everyone starts dropping their beers. They're all just throwing them down on the ground. I'm like, this is weird. Is this a game? Like, what a waste of beer. Like, why is everyone throwing their beer down? So I'm still sipping my beer, just watching this tidal wave of beer, just flying everywhere and the cups going everywhere. And out of nowhere, a police officer on a bicycle pulls up next to me and shines the light on me. And he says, I need to see your ID. Well, my father didn't want me to learn how to drive a car in England because they drive on the left-hand side of the road. So I didn't have a driver's license. I said, well, I don't have an ID. And I keep sipping my beer. And he says, well, how old are you? And I said, I'm 18. And he says, you have to be 21. And I take a sip again. And I said,
for what?
I said, for what? A beer? And he just pauses and he looks at me like I'm just this wildcat, right? And he says, yes, you have to be 21 for a beer. I think he had to think about it. Like, is the law been passed? Like, what's going on? Like, is she a crazy person? Do I have to take her down? Like, what's going on here? So he's like, yes, you have to be 21. And that's when I suddenly realized, oh, shoot. I'm in a totally different country. Like, I'm in my home country, but it's a totally different country. I don't know what I'm doing. And so he then he shines the light at all the dropped cups, all the spilled beer. He says, are these yours too? And I said,
every one of them.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, yep, they're all mine. And all the other new friends of mine are standing around kind of nervous and all that. And some of them had already walked away, but a couple of others felt responsible. So they're just hanging out watching this sort of in awe, right? And he turns to them. He's like, have you been drinking? They're like, no, she already said those are her beers. I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And so then he calls in for backup because I guess I'm just scary. And by the way, I'm still holding my beer and I take another sip and he goes, you need to stop drinking that. I said, well, I'm already in trouble. He's like, yeah, but you just need to stop. I was like, okay, you want me to pour it out? All right, I'll just pour it into this puddle of beer with everyone else's. And then I'm just holding his cup. So anyway, he calls in for backup. I get in trouble with Florida State University because it happened on campus. And then I'm also in trouble with the state government. And I have to go, I have to go to court and everyone there has like shackles on their ankles kind of stuff. And they're in these jumpsuits. And I try to argue with the judge. I'm like, I just came from England and it's okay there. You're allowed to drink there. He's like, well, not here. You're in America. You're an American in America. And then he wanted to know how many credits I was taking. He's like, I hope you're taking a full class load. People are staying in school too long at Florida State. So he starts lecturing me that maybe my class load isn't big enough. Like I need other distractions or something. And so I had all kinds of community service. And then I had to go to like AA classes at Florida State.
You're not the only person that got arrested on Florida State. So
I know. I think they went out in droves, trying to set examples for people. Because then everyone knew. They're like, that's the girl from England who got arrested on at the party.
Running away from the parking lot of the late night library was, I think, just a rite of passage.
Oh, yeah. Well, your sister was wearing a T-shirt that said, if your mom calls, tell her at the library. Yeah. She inspired me to get one of those. Like, where'd you get that T-shirt? I got to get it. I have to get it.
I don't know if you knew this or not, but I grew up in Tallahassee.
I did not know that. Wait a minute. I knew that because Terry grew up in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that doesn't always mean like all the other siblings did too. So yeah. Okay.
No,
Did you
good
get it?
times. I don't remember a whole lot. I was 20 when I moved from Tallahassee and joined the military. So it felt like I was really old because I was the old guy at 20 years old joining the
Yeah.
military. So it's all good. But no, yeah, met my wife in England. It was not love at first sight. It was for me, but not for her. I had to chase her for a while.
How
And
did you convince her to go out with you?
I think she just wanted to say yes just to get me to stop asking. So
That's a flawed logic. I'll say yes and then he'll quit asking.
yeah, it worked for me.
That's great. Well, how did you propose?
So there was this little tiny restaurant right outside the base, and we'd been dating for 7 weeks. That's it. And I think I was about ready to deploy again. So I got down on one knee and got ready to, to ask her, and almost immediately. So it was after I'd gotten down on my knee, but it was, too late to back out, but it was almost on cue. The karaoke singer started singing badly. So
Did he see that you were proposing or was he
no,
interrupting?
it was like in another room. So,
Oh, okay.
but that's okay. It's the memory. And she said yes. So there
Oh,
we
that's
go.
nice. I don't know if that's a military thing as far as short courtships. I don't know if that's a military thing or not, because my grandfather on my dad's side, he only knew my grandmother. Like he met her once or twice and then came back and proposed and she said yes. And then my other grandparents, they knew each other about a month. And then my parents knew each other about 2 months and then got married. All of them. I don't know if this is military guys like, I'm going to go to war. I don't know if I'll be back. Let's get married kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's the sense of urgency or like, I like you. You're good. Let's do this.
I think there's a little bit of that. I'm not sure. It's a wonderful and horrible thing to try and build relationships with people that have completely different upbringings than you. So like a foreign country, or it's like, again, it's a neat thing. It's just like, I don't know how to describe it. Like all the other things in life, if it's the same and it's boring, then why would you want to do it? So, why would I want to do the same thing over and over again? Why would I want to, I guess a little piece of me was, why would I want to marry someone that is exactly like me? So let's marry someone that's the opposite of me. She's funny and she's strong and I know I'd like to think some of those things are what I have, but she complements everything that I'm not so well.
That's nice. It's really sweet. Your face lights up when you talk about her. What British cuisine do you like to eat? What has she exposed you to that you like?
With British cuisine, it's interesting because I always make fun of her. I'm like, because she used to have this cookbook called the Best of British Cooking, but it was more like a pamphlet. It was like a 3x5 card. And
Does it say use salt? No way.
Yeah,
You're gonna put some salt on this?
Yeah. I remember the first time, it's not cuisine, but like, for example, you'd go to the pub and if you asked for a Coke, right, you would get your Coke and it would be a Coke in a glass with like a piece of ice.
I know. Why do they
like
drink
one
it
or
so?
two.
It's so gross. They drink it so warm.
And I was like, I can give you the recipe for ice. I've got it, So, but so one of my big things that I try and do, and I haven't always been good at this, but I try not to, and I know it's not my phrase, I stole it from someone else, is not to yuck other people's yum, right? So
yes,
not just in cuisine, but in life, right? If someone's finding joy from something, then I try not to yuck on their yum. And that's true with
a good
everything.
philosophy. And I feel bad about making fun of them not seasoning their food, but it's fine.
Well, no, that and Marmite are two things that I think it's okay to do. So
I hold on. I kind of like Marmite. I was like, this little bitter, weird taste. Like I kind of got into it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But they do that in Australia too, right? They love that stuff.
I think they have Vegemite there.
Vegemite. That's right. That's kind of the same, right? It's kind of similar.
Yeah. It's yeast. Yeah. Why? But that's okay. I'm not going to yuck on your yum. It's okay.
It's okay. It's all right. Yeah. When we moved into our house in England, my parents thought it would be a great way to get to know the neighbors and invite them over for like cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. But they did American hors d'oeuvres. And we're talking using 7-layer Mexican dip with Doritos because you're able to buy that on the base. And that's
Yeah.
food they do not have in England. And I
Yeah.
remember them looking at it like, what is this? We're like, oh, it's 7-layer taco dip. It's really good. Come on, you got your refried beans and sour cream, and guacamole, and, shredded cheddar, and all this stuff. And they're like, and what are these? And I said, these are Doritos. What's a Dorito? And I can't even do it right.
Yes.
A
Yeah.
Dorito, a Dorito. I'm like, yeah, that's with cheese dust on it. And then you dip it in here and you put it in your mouth. Oh, I could tell they thought it was disgusting. And so I'm sure they all huddled up afterwards. Like, what are these? Who are these Americans serving this weird food?
And you're the one that introduced Doritos to England, and now they're all over the place. See?
Oh, do they have them everywhere now?
I think they have. They've branched out.
Oh, funny. Well, yeah. So we're the ones who started it back in 1989.
Yeah. Yeah. No, British cuisine's interesting. My wife is a really good cook, so as you can tell, unless you have your thin lens on the webcam there. She gets a pass for that one because she's really, really good at cooking. But overall in England, yeah, it's different. Some of the other stuff that would happen that you could get access to base, because you mentioned that we'd get movies before they would even come out in the theater in England.
Yeah.
So you would know what happened. And I was single. This is before I met my wife. And so living the dating life in England, and it's going to get loud in a second.
Oh, we got a fighter jet. All right.
Yeah, another F-18 getting ready to take off. He's revving his engine. You can hear him cooking off a little bit of gas, so he gets light enough to take off. So I'm stalling, trying to wait to tell the story. But
whatever. I want to come visit. I want to see all these airplanes.
Oh, come on out. It's great.
Yeah.
But when the Blair Witch Project came out,
Mm.
So I don't know. Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I remember that movie.
Yeah,
it was kind of a letdown at the end. I mean,
yeah,
completely.
All of it was a little bit of a letdown, period, because you could tell it wasn't real. Even like the news broadcasts that were in the notes and stuff, like they had like the extras in the DVD.
Well, I think the snot in her nose was real, as you're kind of looking up her nose.
Quite possibly, but the rest of it seemed a little bit off, except we don't know what off is like for other countries. So like if we do a TV show that has a British newscast on it, we might not know that it's not real, but a Brit will look at it and go, oh, that's not real, because it's not quite right. It's close, but not quite right.
Right.
And with the Blair Witch Project, I could just totally play it off. I'm like, oh, I remember when this happened in Maryland. I was there and this was all hitting the news. It was a great date movie. I'll just sort of to go from there.
I saw Edward Scissorhands in a British movie theater, and at the time, I had my head was shaved on one side, and then it was long on this side. And in Edward Scissorhands, he starts cutting hair. I don't know if you remember. He started coming with like these really ridiculous looking haircuts, so it would look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa on someone's head, like just like ridiculous looking hairstyles. And then my hairstyle. So along with all these ridiculous hairstyles, he came up with my hairstyle. And there was this little kid behind me. Mom, the woman in front of us has an Edward Scissorhands haircut. So sliding down in my seat. Like, oh.
It sounds like you had an amazing, awesome, cringy teenage life in England.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really
that's
did.
Great.
Yeah, I loved it. All right, let's look at some of these other questions from Terry. Why was Mr. Stevenson your favorite teacher?
Oh, yeah, that's a little bit of a weird one. He was this great science teacher that pushed me and everything else, but he would do these events where you went out and you would go on this, looking back now, like cringy, creepy white van. But you would all gather up in this van and you would go drive out into the middle of the woods and you would find snakes and and this is northern Florida, so there's all kinds of things out there, and you'd get to where the ponds were and he would just sort of dive into the water and go grab stuff and bring it back. He didn't fit the mold for any of my other teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't care. Everyone wants to be accepted a little bit, but everyone also wants to be that person that doesn't care, that
Mhm.
is just going to be the rebel and do their own thing and not care what other people say or think. So you want both. So it's this tug and this push and pull. And he was one of the first adults that I had that showed me that you could kind of still do both. You could be your own person and be interesting, but then also understand where the line was and just be that person that paints just over the line every
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
so
I love
that
that.
it's never enough to get you in real trouble, but you're over the line every single time. So before you know it, you've moved the line. So that was,
Yeah.
he was great. He would, I mean, little weird things like he'd teach you how to catch snakes, which is if they're not a poisonous snake, sort of get over top of them and straddle the snake, and then grab the snake from the tail and whip it up in between your legs, and then close your legs, and then slowly pull the snake to where you could hold its head as well.
All right, hold
Maybe
on. I am petrified of snakes, and you just made my heart rate just spike. You
yeah.
did. You totally did. I am not straddling a snake, grabbing it by its tail, and then sliding it through my legs. Just not, I am not doing that.
And this is
No.
probably, it's maybe not even the right way to do it, but that's what he taught us. And
Oh
and
my
we
God.
believed him. We believed him.
No.
We did it. I guess that's how you don't hurt the snake. It's also how you traumatize a bunch of high school students.
No. It seems like if you're sliding a snake through your legs, that you're going to rub against their little scales. And that doesn't happen because their scales are all going like in this direction and you're sliding it.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah,
you,
but
are
it's
you
it just works. It's one of those
okay?
things that's hard to describe. You just have to experience it, Deidre, and
Uh-huh.
go try it for yourself.
I am
And
not. I
then
am not. That is definitely a skill. But you said this is for non-poisonous. So let's say you see a rattlesnake. Are you going to straddle it and like slide it through your
no,
legs? What do you
no, it
do when you
was
see a rattlesnake? What did he teach you?
to point and say, Mr. Stevenson, there's a rattlesnake. So, but
You got a king cobra, you're gonna straddle it.
yeah, yeah,
No
yeah,
thanks.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
It's interesting being here on Whidbey Island now, because growing up in Florida, everything could, kill you. Like the mosquitoes bit you and gave you malaria, and there were rattlesnakes and there were alligators and all these other, spiders that were poisonous. And we moved here and everyone asked us like, okay, so what's the thing to look out for? And it's like nothing. Whidbey Island has nothing. It has no poisonous snakes, no poisonous spiders, uh,
Do you have mosquitoes?
no, very few, because that's an island. We can see the
Wow.
ocean from, like, I can stand on, high points on my property and
Hmm.
basically see water on both sides. So you get the wind coming through and very few mosquitoes, though my wife finds them all. Um, there, there are elk on the mainland, but we only have one elk. He's been here for like 20 years. His name is Bruiser.
Well, do
He
you
gets
think the
very,
other elk refer to him as like the creepy elk that's by himself on the
oh,
island? You're like,
definitely.
stay away
And
from that guy.
they've tranquilized him several times and like moved him off the island, and he comes back. And then every year,
That's
uh,
interesting. He's a hermit elk.
yeah, and every year he gets to where he's looking for girls, and there are no girl elk.
Uh-huh.
So he basically gets angry. He'll attack bicycles and chain link fences and things like that. And so they'll have to tranquilize him to get like the 3 bicycles out of his head, that he's walking around with. And, poor kids, running behind him trying to get their bicycles back. So yeah, it's interesting. And then every once in a while, it makes the news, like a bear will come through. But no, nothing dangerous. It's a wonderful place to be. So
Huh.
you can just sort of, we have this big barn. I think I mentioned it before. And knowing there's nothing dangerous,
Mhm.
because I think everyone has fears when they're kids, the dark or whatever else. And then some of these fears turn into fears when you're an adult that are realistic. Like, we're all scared a snake might bite us, right? But is it reasonable? Is it reasonable that there's going to be a snake under every single log if you're not
Yes.
in Tallahassee, Florida?
100% reasonable.
And to to be somewhere where it takes away some of that risk
Mhm.
is a neat thing, because you get to talk to yourself and talk yourself into doing fun things. And I think that's really what I try to do in life, whether it's, traveling the country for a year or starting a business or doing whatever else. I might seem like I'm trying to do some exciting and fun things, but I'm doing it within the confines of what I find to be comfortable.
Mm.
Um, and so it's sort of a cowardly risk taking, but that makes it fun for me. It's the same way I can go out to my barn and I can turn off all the lights and sit in the complete darkness in this 100-year-old barn and be okay doing it, even if some of my fears when I was a kid were the things that you would think of being in a barn like that. And that's kind of fun. I think that if I try and do that with life too.
So you started a business and it has to do with woodworking. What's going on
So
there?
yes and no. I used to introduce myself as a woodworker, but that's not what I do. I make things that are important for people, the things that represent important moments in people's careers and in their lives. For the military, it tends to be a lot of, taking important moments from their careers or representations of their careers and summarizing it in an item like a shadow box to hold their medals or whatever else. I had someone who was retiring and he had his medals. And then he had medals that were his grandfather's that he wanted incorporated. He didn't know any stories about it. He just knew that he had these medals from his grandfather. He was a soldier in the British Army with the Indian forces that were, from India that were fighting with the British. And there's a better way to say it than that. I don't want to be offensive to anyone. But anyway, so I found on the back of the medal his name. And my wife was able to deep dive into his family and the history and actually find his name, his grandfather's name on this memorial that was in a foreign country and we got a picture of this memorial and put it on the back of a special piece and just sort of surprised him with that. And so it wasn't what he asked for at all. If he, it wasn't what he came to me saying, hey, this is what I want you to build me. I built this other thing for him, but we built this special box for that and then put all the information we found about his grandfather in it.
I bet he was
And
thrilled.
it brought him to tears
Yeah.
and it brought his family to tears and it was just special. And that's what a gift is. It doesn't have to be a big important thing like a box. Sometimes it's representing moments. For example, I make a lot of Christmas ornaments because the military, as you know, they have symbols that represent the units they're in. It's almost like a corporate logo for a lot of people. It's something, a corporate logo, same way, it's something that's important to that person. I had one unit that was going on an aircraft carrier it's the USS Abraham Lincoln is the name of the carrier. So what I did for them was I did their unit logo and then a big picture of Abraham Lincoln wearing a Santa hat. And that was their ornament. It was pretty basic. It was fun. There was nothing wrong with it. It did the job. But then I was communicating with the spouses back here and I let them know that I wanted to give them something. There wasn't that many of them and they were buying a lot of stuff from me. One of the things when the guys deploy, the girls deploy, is both sides do a lot of retail therapy. So they'll buy a lot of items through me. And it helps with Christmas gifts and, other, anniversaries and whatnot. And so I wanted to give back to them a little bit. So I gave the spouses an ornament, but they didn't understand what it was at first until I showed them the first one. So all the guys in the ship got the ornament with Abraham Lincoln on them. And then all the spouses, I made them an ornament and it was half of a heart. And then it was the silhouette of a woman sort of kissing into the empty half of the heart. And when you nested the two ornaments together, it was this woman inside a heart kissing Abraham Lincoln's face. And they didn't know about it. And so it wasn't till, the unit came back home and they got to see the ornaments put together.
There we go. Did they break the sound barrier or no?
They can't. They don't do it here. That's just a takeoff with an afterburner. And at night, it's pretty neat because it's, the fire coming out of the back of the airplane.
Yeah.
And then like when they filmed the newest Top Gun movie, they filmed a lot of it here.
Oh.
So I still haven't seen the movie.
I haven't either. I heard it's good.
Yeah, I did too. I'd like to go see movies more, but I'd have to leave the island to do that. So why would I do that?
And you're not leaving the island for a little while. It sounds like everything you make is very sentimental and it means something. Do you ever make service awards that are seemingly odd or silly?
Oh yeah.
But,
some of them are inside jokes.
Okay. I mean, do you ever make stuff like this person ate the most deviled eggs or they're dealing with a difficult boss and they get the award for that?
Yes, it'll, sometimes it's like I want a plaque with a banana peel on it because this person's
Mhm.
super clumsy, or sometimes they're inside jokes on the back of things. Or for example, one of the units here, I don't know if you remember several years ago that there was a US Navy airplane that drew a phallic symbol in the clouds.
Mhm.
If you remember that,
Mhm.
that was a unit from here.
Oh,
Yeah, they got in trouble. Now it's sort of come full circle. While they got in trouble, but not that much trouble. So they still can't openly sort of celebrate that moment, but they sneak it into their gifts.
they
Like
sneak
you'll have,
penises into the into their gifts.
I'm
Penis
probably like
penis
totally,
clouds.
I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but
It's not
they'll,
classified.
yeah, they'll be like, okay, so do this and have all this and it's big and exciting, and then somewhere in the corner, like really small, where only we know and we can point it out, make sure you put the sky penis in,
Oh, okay. Because
So,
a minute ago you said it's big and exciting, and I thought maybe that was the penis, but no. So
no,
everything else, and then the penis is small and
yeah,
hidden.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, hidden, yeah, because they sort of try to hide it. So we have the barn, and one of the things we did for the first sort of 5 years we were here, and we missed it last
Uh-huh.
year, but I need to get back onto this because I'm retired Air Force and they're all Navy, and we're right by the runway. So I put in sort of 30 square feet Christmas blue Christmas lights. I put the Air Force symbol on the side of the barn. So just sort of to poke fun at the Navy, because as they're taxiing up, there's this huge Air Force symbol on the side of the barn. And for the first couple of years, I would ask my Navy buddies, I'd say, hey, can you guys see the Christmas lights from the runway? And they're all like,
Uh-huh.
no, we can't see the. Finally, after, getting a couple bourbons into a buddy of mine, he's like, yes, everyone can see the Christmas lights. We all get the warnings. There's some more. But no one's
That
going
was
to give you the
great.
satisfaction of knowing you got the Christmas lights. And then one year I was talking to someone in leadership on the base that was over, and I said, yeah, I think this year I'm not going to do the Air Force symbol. He's like, oh,
Uh-huh.
thank goodness. And I said, well, I think I want to put the sky penis in the side of the barn in Christmas lights. He's like, oh, please don't.
Oh, you should. So did you?
No, not yet. It's on my
Oh,
list.
oh,
Yeah.
you need to send me a picture when you do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. This is probably the only sanctioned dick pic that's allowed. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the Arby's logo. It's
all right, let's move on to another question from your sister. It says here that you wanted to hike the AT, and I wasn't sure what the AT was. So I Googled it, and it's the Appalachian Trail. Duh, I should have known that. So she said that you wanted to apparently hike this. And for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's about what, 2,000 miles or
It's a
something?
long, it's a long way. It's about 1,999 miles more than I actually have hiked of it. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I went to a 3-day Fish concert many, many years ago, and
Yeah.
it was at the northern tip of Maine. I think it was like an abandoned Air Force base, actually. And there were a bunch of people that had hiked the Appalachian Trail, and they, finished their trip there at the Fish concert.
The smell must have been amazing.
At the Fish concert? Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
BO, lots of BO.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Hikers and
patchouli.
non-hikers.
Yeah.
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 Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, I never hiked the AT. I wanted to. It was sort of I don't know if it was a dream of mine or if it was just an idea. But no, I'm old now. I should probably do that. It's not an excuse. It's one of those things. Maybe that's what the next adventure to be is,
Uh-huh.
go off and just start walking. I'll be the opposite of the guy that stays in his shop all the time for a little while.
I met a guy by the name of John Francis who decided, there was a couple things about this guy I thought was pretty interesting. I met him at the National Geographic Explorers Gala many, many years ago. And I was so excited to go to this. And I partnered with them because of my job at Geico. And so I thought I was going to meet like the guy who lived with lions or whatever. And they put me next to John Francis, very nice guy, but turns out he had given up his car and he walked everywhere. I said, you guys realize I'm representing Geico, like auto insurance. And the guy sitting next to me doesn't even have a car. Who thought this through? But he walked absolutely everywhere. But the other thing is that he had taken a vow of silence, and he would renew it like year after year after year. And it improved his relationship with his wife. But he said he also learned so much about other people. because of this vow of silence. And I was so impressed by what he said that I recommend that now to people that have problems interrupting others. Like, you need to find a day of the week. I'm not even saying do a year like this guy. Like, just take one day and don't talk at all and just focus on listening to everybody else instead. But he said he just learned so much. As soon as people realized that he wasn't going to talk, they started talking. And then they just kept talking and talking and talking because most people don't listen, and they could finally relax knowing that they weren't going to be interrupted or judged for what they were saying. And I just thought it was really fascinating. I think everyone should
It
try it.
is. I like that idea. Do you remember, or do you know if he had a trail name?
No, I don't think he was so much of a hiker. It's just he thought that cars did terrible things to the environment. So he just walked absolutely everywhere. And I don't even know how many ridiculous number of miles he
Right.
put on his feet, just walking
It's
everywhere.
fascinating.
All right. Yeah. You can Google him, look up Walk the Earth and his 17-year vow of silence.
Holy
And
smokes.
yeah, John Francis, the planet walker.
That's
So that is
cool.
the gentleman I was sitting next to. And yeah, he was quite interesting, but I thought, I am representing auto insurance. And this guy is saying cars are terrible.
Geico. I'm not a Geico guy, by the way. I never have been. USAA, because of the military.
Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. So I worked at Geico for 19 years and I had USAA the entire time.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the reason I asked before about his trail name, if you had one, was, I don't know if this is the right thing or wrong thing, but I know you have your fun questions you asked. And I always turn to, okay, well, what's the question that she hasn't asked that would be a fun question? And I always think about that, because these hikers have trail names, and sometimes there are stories that are associated with them. And the military the same way. Like, these pilots have these call signs, just like in the movies, you have Iceman and Maverick and things like that. These pilots really have these call signs that they're
given. They do. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they have stories associated with them, and sometimes it's just like a derivative of their name. The ones with stories are the most fun to me, because sometimes they're crude, sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're embarrassing. And I thought, well, most people don't have call signs. Mm-hmm. And so, a question would be like, if you could have a call sign, you get to name yourself your call sign, what would it be? So
it's got to be edgy and a little dangerous, but not like offensive.
Right. Now, with the military, what happens is, if you do that, if you try and give yourself a call sign that's a little bit edgy or a little dangerous, they will tweak it just enough to make it ridiculous. And then you get...
Well, it's sort of like when people describe themselves as being funny, and I've met other people that describe themselves as being a badass. And in both of those situations, that's something other people have to say about you. I don't think you can walk around and say, hi, I'm funny, or hi, I'm a badass. Like, it's just, it doesn't land right. Other people have to describe you as funny or being a badass. So if you're walking around saying I'm dangerous, that, I got to knock you down a peg or two. Other people have to say you're dangerous.
Yeah. So interesting is the same way, by the way. It also works if someone introduces you as funny, then it's impossible then to be funny.
Oh,
like totally. If someone says, no, this person's funny, this podcast is a little bit intimidating for that reason, because someone is saying, oh, you're interesting. Oh, great. I have to come onto a podcast now and be interesting. Welcome to the most boring day of my life, where I don't feel interesting to myself. I'm putting myself to sleep today. But
I was on a podcast and they introduced me, and the first question was, why are you so interesting? And what a horrific question to ask somebody, because I'm not coming in here on a unicycle juggling fire. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about helping others find a more interesting way to approach life so that you can feel more awake and alive and not feeling so numb and bored. I mean, that's what it is. And we're all walking around, we get in those routines, and we are all a little bit boring.
What do you wish you'd said?
I really wanted to say, that's a terrible question. I wanted, but you can't, you can't really chastise the person interviewing you. I mean, that's rude. So I had to kind of shift in a different
Yeah.
direction. Okay, so she told me to ask you about hiking the AT, and the answer is I never did. I just wanted to.
No. But you know
But
what? It says a lot that you have a sibling that remembers that, I have a sibling when you have someone that remembers something that was important to you that is
uh-huh.
no longer important to you. There's a
Yeah.
lot there, because
Yeah.
I wonder how much we do that in relationships anyway. It doesn't mean that she doesn't know these things, but that's something she remembers was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Maybe she's
and
trying to nudge you into hiking,
that's
right?
her yeah, that's her roundabout way of calling me fat, I think.
Oh,
That's how
your
that's
sister just
that's
called you fat. No, I
I'm
think the roundabout way of calling someone fat is giving them a Fitbit, because that is the worst gift ever. Happy, right? Happy
Yeah,
birthday. I think you're fat. Why don't you walk or something?
yeah,
Here's something to track you. Like that would be calling
yeah.
you fat.
And here's some dental floss. Yeah.
Flush your teeth while you're at it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see what other. Okay. She said you had a pet rabbit in the military. What's
She's
going on with
really she is so messing with you.
is she?
Yeah, yeah. She's taking it back to survival school when they're trying to teach you to be self-reliant, and they give you a live rabbit to carry around, and they make you name it before you eat it.
No. Are you serious? Are you making
I'm,
that up?
I'm totally serious.
So
Was
you had to develop a relationship, a loving relationship with a rabbit and then eat it?
Yeah, we named ours food.
Did everyone else name theirs food?
No, just us. But yeah,
Oh
that was
man.
that was
That's
her that was her
go ahead.
totally throwing that out your way. After a couple days of walking around, the relationship did not seem that important.
I see. Yeah, so they're desensitizing you in a way.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff in the military is interesting. You don't understand the reasons why until later.
Mhm.
And even then, some of it seems stupid, but you just kind of roll with the punches sometimes. And then sometimes you buck the system a little bit. Again, just coloring just past the line. But yeah, no, not a pet rabbit. A rabbit with
Okay,
like
so
2 days
first off,
same food.
are there vegans in the military? I mean, what do they do for them? Like, here's a hunk of tofu,
Oh,
give it
there
a name,
are.
and then you.
We had other things too. We had like a potato and a carrot, and that's about it.
Well, no
So.
one's going to develop a relationship. Well, you hope they don't develop a relationship with their carrot. Um,
That's a different kind of podcast, teacher. So
well, I might have to cut that.
you might.
Anyway, I'm blushing. I'm so sorry. All right,
Yeah,
so let's see here. What else can I ask you? You're
I
still
got
thinking about the
nothing.
carrot.
I am totally like, oh, that she gets to cut stuff out, and I'm thinking of all the other stuff I want to ask you to cut out. So
I think I'm going to leave it in. I don't know. I did
okay,
say it's explicit, but everything I've said has been pretty PG all these episodes leading up to this. Okay. We are moving into our heavy petting peeves segment. I need to come up with a sound effect for that. Like, I think I need like a wow and then no or something. I don't know. I gotta work. I gotta work on the sounds. Okay. So what are your pet peeves?
the sound of people eating is not awesome, but I guess I'm not the only one that way. Who likes that? Like, thing about a pet peeve is everyone thinks, well, how is that a pet peeve? Because why would anyone like this thing? We all think that our pet peeves aren't really that bad or annoying, when it really, some people, I guess, don't mind the sound of someone chewing their cud like a cow in their ear.
There are a lot of people that can't stand those wet mouth sounds, but other people, it doesn't bother them at all, especially the people making those sounds. I don't like it when people pop their gum and I can hear that from far away. That drives me crazy. We had talked about fears and then I never followed up with this question. So what were you afraid of as a child and what are you afraid of now?
Again, as a child, it's all the standard normal things, the snakes and the spiders and the monsters and all those things. As an adult, it becomes like you never know what true fear is until you're a guy and you're outside, and guys outside on 5-acre land, pieces of land, you don't go inside necessarily to use the facilities to go to the restroom. And true fear is when you're outside going to the restroom and a yellow jacket lands on you.
On your cloud
I'm just saying,
formation.
I'm just saying that, you know, there's
when
yeah,
a yellow jacket.
there is no better way to find your inner peace than that. And that moment is when every person can find their true fear. So
I can't imagine. That's it's a tense moment right there.
That's
Very
just one
tense.
of those. It's just one of those moments, and no matter what, you look back and you're just like, "Oh, I'm starting to sweat a little bit just thinking about it here." You know. So,
how often has that happened to you?
It's never going to happen more than once, because then you go inside to go to the bathroom every time. I can tell you that.
So you will not pee outside because of the yellow jacket incident.
You're at least checking. You're checking the room first. You know, you're looking around left, right, and center here.
Okay. So now we are going to move into a few questions from the very interesting game show. As a reminder, no politics, no religion, no ad nauseum topic du jour. Let's not talk about the virus.
Okay.
All right. And I'm looking for the most ridiculous, interesting, and creative answers. Herring communicate with each other by farting. What messages do you wish you could deliver with a fart?
I think the message would have to be like, "Hey, do you smell smoke?" So the person,
so then they have to breathe it in.
and they have to breathe, you know, but that's just my twisted sense of humor.
Well, the other day I farted and my dog immediately smelled his butt and then looked back at me like, that was you? Snakes can swallow things larger than their heads because they have flexible jaws. What do you wish was extra flexible, and what would you do with that ability?
I at this point, I just want to be able to bend down and tie my own shoes. So just any normal flexibility for a normal person sounds pretty good when you're like nearing the wrong side of 50. So
I love the sound effect that just came after that as well. All right, let's see this one. No one has a good answer for this one, so pressure off. Okay. You ready? Okay. A coin in medieval England cost the same as a goat. It was called a groat. What would you call a coin today that you could buy a hamburger, a new phone, car, or anything you make up?
Like, I know it's like loony in Canada. I don't know if you know this, but they have loonies and toonies. Yeah. And I think we should just do something like that, where we just have something ridiculous. Whatever the cost of a ticket to Disney World is becomes a Mickey, you know? And so it costs you one Mickey, and then it's got a, Mickey Mouse ears on it and whatever else.
Astronauts left 96 bags of urine, feces, and vomit on the moon. They left 2 golf balls too. What should they leave there the next time they visit?
You're gonna have to ask again. Here comes an airplane.
That's a really fast airplane.
It's gonna get busy again. It was quiet for a while. It's gonna get super busy again.
Well, we're almost done.
So whatever it is they leave, I know that it seems like golf balls and urine and feces don't have an explanation, but they can probably dig up the golf ball thing, like, Buzz Aldrin, hit the golf ball on the moon. That's why it's left there. I think they should leave something that has no explanation whatsoever, just randomly, so that archaeologists in the future can just try and make up the answer for what it is, like a stuffed bunny rabbit, or, just something completely random. And that's what I think they should do, just because I think that would be fun and interesting, because I wonder how many things we find now that archaeologists find are just other, like 2,000 years ago, they had a sense of humor. And they're like, I wonder if anyone ever finds this big pile of stones that they'll try and make something up from it, when really it's just a big pile of stones.
Yeah, every time they put together a little package and put it in the corner of a building, or like some little time capsule, I'm always disappointed by what the authorities, have decided they're going to put in this time capsule. Like, I don't think that really represents what's going on. And where's the sense of humor? I saw someone the other day posted something on, I think it was Instagram, where it was, they were redoing their kitchen cabinets. And in the corner, it was sort of this void space that was covered by the countertop. And they put a skeleton in there, not a real skeleton, but just.
Yes.
Did you see that?
That's awesome. I did see that. And it made me think, because I leave notes, because we do constructions too. And I leave notes for people in the future. Yeah.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah. One of the notes I left one time was there's $100 bill behind one of these walls.
Oh, that's messed up. That is so messed up. By the
That
time they
was,
find it, $100 won't be worth much. You should have said there's $1
yeah.
million hidden in here.
Yeah, I should have, but this is back when I was in college when $100 seemed like it was like worth the world. You could buy like 200 natty lights for that. So
There's a Mickey behind the wall. You can take a
yes.
family of 4 to Disney World. What? Yeah, so they're gonna
Yep.
tear up the wall for that. And finally, what should have been invented by now?
I want to take it back thing. Like, I think you should be born with like 5 or 6 pieces of paper or notes that have value because you only have 5 or 6 of them for your entire life, and they can't be sold and they can't be transferred or anything else. And if you say something or do something and you really, 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 really want to take it back, you can just give them that take it back note.
And
Wouldn't
they
cost
forget
anything.
it. They
And
forget it.
well, I think that it would be like, say I said something to you that was really mean and cruel,
Uh-huh.
which I would hope I wouldn't do. But if I did, and I immediately regretted it because I was just in a bad place or like I wasn't being myself. If I gave you that take it back note, you'd be like, he only has 5 of these for his entire life. So it wouldn't matter if it was cruel, it would still have value and meaning because you'd know that I really meant to take it back.
Because I only gave you my few take backs.
Yeah, like one of your only take it backs that you ever had. So because we all do and say stupid things.
Well, that would really teach children the value of money.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's always more money that you could make. You can always go out and work hard, hustle, and make some more money, but you're not getting any more of these take backs. Like, that's it.
That's it. Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
It's got value.
Ah. Other people would have like start selling options on the take backs.
Yeah, I know.
They would find a way to. But I love that idea. It's great.
Monetize it. Yeah,
they totally would. Yeah, like your future's children's take backs, and yeah.
I mean, you could
find
actually,
a way.
you could actually do it without even like making it a thing. Like you could write out a piece of paper and say, I have 5 of these for the rest of my life. And with your friends, they would know you only have 5 of those. It doesn't even take a organization thing. But anyway, take it back.
I think that is something you could mint as an NFT, actually.
Absolutely.
That's how you could prove it. So it's not just a post-it note that you wrote on there. I mean, why not go ahead and say, these are my take backs and I only get these for the rest of my life. Don't know how much longer I'm going to live, but this is all I get.
Yep.
I think you're onto a business idea. I'm not even kidding. People would buy those. Like, I actually get this take back. Your company could be called No Take Backs.
See, there we go.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a great idea, actually. Do you realize how many people would buy those? Especially if they know they only get 5, and you can prove it with blockchain technology. You can prove that there really is, you really only have 5.
Yeah. And that's
this is a great idea. If someone's going to steal this, you need to get on it. I'm posting this on Friday.
Yeah. I'm going to go to notakebacks.com and lock it down.
You need to lock it down. I'm not kidding. Someone's going to go buy it. There are people who do that.
That's okay. Then I can be on podcast as the guy that lost out on the opportunity.
He'll be right up there with the post-it note inventor. Okay. Is there any way that you'd like people to get in touch with you? You want to send them to your website or anything like that?
I mean, if they want to come to reflectionsofservice.com, I think the last time I updated it was about 3 years ago. So, I need to get on my social media game a little bit more, except I don't. Everything's word of mouth. I like to do interesting things. So if you've got an interesting gift, or if you don't know what to get someone, which, I run into, I do like taking those personal challenges on. Usually I tell people, I'm like, okay, tell me about the person that you're doing a gift for, either over a phone call, or sometimes I'll tell them, hey, do like voice to text and just talk for 1 minute about this person and about the things they like and the things that represent your relationship with them. And about half the time, that's why I used to say, talk to me, but now I say, do it on like a voice to text, because about half the time, about 30 seconds into the voice to text, their text goes, actually, I know now what I'm getting them. Never mind. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Reach out to me at reflectionsofservice.com if you want. I love helping people find gifts, not just that I make, but sometimes that I make, or events for shows, or for corporate gifts or for corporate awards that are unique and represent them, and the relationship with the person that's coming.
That last part was cut out by a fighter jet.
That's appropriate.
Is it? Do you want to leave it like that? Or
I don't mind. It's not, to be honest, I didn't come here to plug. I
yeah.
came here because my sister asked me to.
Well, I've enjoyed meeting you. I think this was a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate you spending all this time with me. And big thanks to Terry for recommending her big brother and giving me some fun questions to ask. And for anyone else listening, if you're now inspired, don't forget you'll get a special mug. It doesn't have to be the don't pee in this mug. If there's another mug on my site that you want instead, I'll go ahead and give that to you as a token of gratitude if I select your nominee for another show in the future. Do you have any advice or final words for the listeners?
Take that little risk. Be calculated if you can, but take that little risk. But I know that's what the person before me said, and the person
But that's
before me,
okay
and
because
person before me.
No. All right. So first off, you got to think about this. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. And then number two, people aren't always going to listen to every single episode. They're going to pick and choose which episodes they listen to. And the way you say it might not resonate in the way that someone else says it, and vice versa. Like they might really
No,
latch
absolutely.
on to the Geico caveman, but they're someone else is not really into the caveman. They're going to skip past that episode and they're going to listen to you. Like, okay, I can relate to this guy. I've always wanted to get in an RV and go to all of the parks. I mean, now they're looking up the price and they're saying, I can do this. I do work from home. I could work from an RV. I'm going to go travel now. So you're going to inspire those people to do that. And
Yep.
that's great.
Okay. So yeah, awesome. It's just, if I could say anything to the people that are listening right now, it would be to think of the things that you want to do. Think of those big goals that you want, and to figure out what the next step is to get to that goal, and then to just to do it, because it gets so easy for us to get stuck in a rut. And even me right now, stuck, like I said, well, I never leave the shop right now, but there's a little piece of me that's starting to think about what's the next goal. How is my business going to end? No matter what, you're at least working towards a goal, and it's fun. And if you don't make that goal, then make another goal, and it all works out.
Yeah. All right. Until next time, be interesting.